Whatever happened here, happened. Now the book of Jude talks more about this. He says this, Jude's a little short book, he said, the angels which kept not their first estate, but went after strange flesh, he hath reserved in everlasting chains, in darkness, unto the judgment of the great day. These angels that took for them wives from the daughters of men produced mighty men, men of old, that were men of renown. The book of Hebrews is about the worship of angels, and Galatians talks about the worship of angels in chapter 3. Acts chapter 7 talks about the worship of angels. Colossians chapter 2 talks about the worship of angels, and all of these in a negative way. You shouldn't do this. The worship of angels was a big problem when the New Testament was written. It's in many books. And Hebrews makes a central theme out of it. Really, I think the other books do too in their own way. What is the worship of angels? It is the worship of mighty men. This is my conviction. Men of old, men of renown. Those of us here in America, we have been inundated with the worship of angels, and we don't even know it. Let me give you an example. It's a cultural reality. We live in this culture, and because of what our ancestors have done, the vestiges and the indicia of the vestiges of angel worship are with us. All of the names of the days of our weeks are named after these mighty men, men of old, men of renown. Odin, sometimes called Woden in the ancient literature, was the god of our, I'm speaking of us here, of our ancestors. Anglo-Saxon chronicles place him 17 generations from Noah. But his name was Woden, or Odin, and our day, Wednesday, is named after Odin, Odin's Day. We've slurred it into Wednesday. Tuesday is after Tau, or Tu, depends on how you pronounce it, the Nordic god of, I don't know what. Some people connect him with Nimrod. Nimrod, it is believed, is a vestige of the mighty men, the founder of Babylon, men of old, men of renown. These were men of great physical power and stature, usually. They were political figures. Thursday is named for Thor. Thor is a little more well known. And Friday is named for the Nordic god Frigg. Saturday is named for Saturn. Saturn was worshipped all over the world. And then Sunday was named for the worship of the sun. Monday was named for the worship of the moon. Worshipping the host of heaven, literally, our ancestors did. I don't want to say you do. But the vestiges of this worship are with us. And it still, of course, goes on. And the names of our months also go back to the mighty men, the men of old, the men of renown. All of these happenings, and we see them here in Genesis 6 and also in Jude and also in 2 Peter, all of these things are Satan's attempt to pollute the human race and create the idea of a false Son of God that can be worshipped. Satan knew from Genesis chapter 3 verse 15 that the Messiah, the Savior of mankind, would come through the seed of the who? Woman. And therefore he set out, not knowing which woman or which seed, to pervert that seed. The sons of God then were sent to come in to the daughters of men and pervert the seed and produce men, by the way, who have been worshipped for centuries.
So you think that some of these Greek gods that we consider fables may have been really sons
of God. Well, clearly the fables themselves say there. I was studying in Titus talking about Crete, because Titus says about the Cretans are always liars, slow bellies. That means they're gluttons. And I got to studying about Crete, and I found that Crete had an ancient lawgiver. and he's still called the ancient lawgiver of Crete. And his name was Minos, later called Minos Taurus, which means Minos the bull. Well, I thought that's interesting, and I tried to discover what time he lived, and he lived, according to the legend, before the flood, about this time, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men. And then I discovered that he was a very large man, physically powerful, and he wore horns on his head. As a matter of fact, it is said that he had the head of a bull and the body of a man. Now, whether or not he took the head of a bull and put it on his head like a mask, or I don't know, but the fables, and when you say the word fable, that has a very distinct meaning. It doesn't mean it's false. It just means it's something that came down to it based on fact, and there's probably some pollution in it. So the myths and the fables, and Paul talks about fables in the New Testament, of the ancient past, it seems to me, are not just fairy tales based on nothing. And even like fairy tales are based on fact. Usually there's some fact behind them. And all the perverted stories of all the people groups of the world are based on fact. I'll give you an example. All of the cultures and people of the world have a story of the flood. It's all a little different, but they all have a story that's likened to the story of Noah. Why is that?
The word was passed down.
It really happened. Yeah. And as time went, there are some of us, God has blessed us with his account of the flood, and we have the written account. There are others who have passed it down through oral tradition, and it gets perverted in time or changed, but the flood is always there in every country and every continent of the world. For example, I mentioned the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles. Sir Flinders Petrie presented them before the British Archaeological Society in 1917, and he talked about their consistency. They are very consistent with everything we know to be true. And so the indicia of reliability is there. But the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, along with the Icelandic Chronicles, and the Irish Chronicles, and the Celtic Chronicles, they all come in one book. All of them traced back to Noah and the flood. All of them. And that was before they were Christianized. The saga, there's another word like fable, the saga of Beowulf. We don't know when that was written, but we know from reading it, it was written before Christianity came to Britain and Denmark. It occurred in Denmark, but it was written by Anglo-Saxons. It occurred in Denmark, but it was written by Anglo-Saxons. But in that saga, Cain is referenced, because Grendel was a son of Cain. So we have oral tradition of things that the Bible records among all peoples. I'm just using the examples that I know because I'm familiar with those. Worshipping angels. Hebrews was written against that.
The mighty men are the angels or just the prodigy of angels?
The prodigy of angels. But then the question comes, and I don't have the answer to this. The Bible gives it. It hasn't come to me. Are these men, are they half angels, half demons, or you can say half demons because they're fallen angels, Nephilim? We have incontrovertible evidence by any standard of the laws of evidence that I know about that's worthwhile here. And so when we read this, we know this to be true. And God, I believe, wants us to stick pretty close to it. We do have to make inferences, as you say, necessary inferences. There are some necessary inferences. Paul wrote to the Romans. Well, he didn't write that to me. It's addressed to the Romans. I have to make a one-step inference and say it also applies to me. That's one step. God gave the law to the Hebrews. Well, did he give that law to me? Well, I make a one-step inference and say, yes, he intends those same kind of standards for me. But to go further than that, get strung out real thin on your reasoning is dangerous.